This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Should I actually be happy that the Browns traded Myles Garrett? Certainly, I and a lot of other Browns fans are not happy that the Browns have traded Myles Garrett, right? I don't think there is a reasonable pathway to being happy about something like that. Myles Garrett is a special player, and whenever you have to lose a special player for whatever reason it is, even if it makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense, it's not going to make a difference. You're still not going to be happy about letting a player like that go. Also, very unlikely you can win a trade when you're giving up a player like Myles Garrett, which is my objection to trading him in the first place. But there are folks who do see more of a light at the end of this tunnel than maybe I saw at the beginning of this whole story. So we're going to listen to some people who have been more positive about this trade, who do see more of a light here, and see how I feel about those arguments that they're putting forth. So we got Rich Eisen, Joe Thomas said something very positive about this trade, Nathan Zagura. So we're going to try to get ourselves, if you aren't there, in a positive place about this Myles Garrett trade. Let's start with Rich Eisen.
I think they had no choice but to do it. And I think they're late to the party on it. What do you think about that?
Agree.
Because you had Myles last year. He set the single season sack record and won Defensive Player of the Year unanimously. You cannot have a better individual season than what this guy did at this position than what he did. And you wound up 6th overall in the draft. That's it. More memories, more excitement going to the game, wearing his jersey. The single season sack record and won Defensive Player of the Year unanimously. You cannot have a better individual season than what this guy did at this position than what he did. And you wound up 6th overall in the draft.
Okay, so this is a common argument I've heard since the Browns have traded Myles Garrett. And I'm going to be honest, I think this argument is bullshit. I think it's cope, right? Whenever we make this argument, I think we're coping because it's very short-sighted. And I think it's besides the main point. Rich's argument here is that look how good Myles Garrett was last year, and the Browns still only won 5 games, which is a point that can be made, right? And I think the larger point he's going for is Myles Garrett couldn't change your win-loss record dramatically individually. So getting a bunch of assets for him would be better for you in the long run because what you need is more players. But the Browns already got a bunch of assets on the offensive side of the ball that they spent before they even traded Myles Garrett, right? Like, if you really look at the assets that we got for trading Myles Garrett, that's not enough to turn an offense around, right? What's enough to turn the offense around is what we got last year and combining that with other years of moves. But I don't think what we got from the Myles Garrett trade was necessary in order to fix the offense. And like, you could have fixed the offense and kept Myles Garrett on the roster if you really wanted to, right? Obviously, there would have been some strife there. Myles Garrett was angling to get out, but he doesn't have the leverage to force his way out of Cleveland. We went through this last year where he requested a trade publicly. The Browns didn't do it. Myles Garrett played, and he had a great season, right? You could make the argument that he would have been unhappy and all of that, but he was unhappy last year, and he broke the sack record. So he was still going to be an effective player for you. It's like, yeah, Myles was great last year. He was historic last year, and the Browns weren't a good football team, but it wasn't the defense that was the problem there, right? We know what the problem was last year. It was quarterback play. It was the offense. It was partially the head coach as well, right? So we got rid of the head coach. We upgraded the offense. We spent money on the offensive line. We spent draft picks on the offensive line. We spent draft picks at wide receiver. And now you're telling me after all of that work that we did to address the offense so that we could be a better football team because we know what we have on defense, we're going to trade the best player on the thing that we've been counting on, which is the defense. There's no way to spin this to where this trade is going to be like amazing for Cleveland. Like I think we have to throw water on that idea. I get what Rich is going for, but the haul that you got in draft picks is simply just not that plentiful. It's not that fruitful. We're talking about late first, late second, late third round picks, right? Like it's not enough to make up for the gap that you're going to have with Myles Garrett. So, yeah, while I can understand the rudimentary logic you could use to get to that conclusion, which is like, oh, well, we weren't good last year when Myles was awesome, so we might as well trade him. If you were trading Myles Garrett to get pieces that would undeniably fix the offense, I would understand that argument. If you were trading Myles Garrett and you got Jarrett Verse and a quarterback in return, I would understand that argument. But you didn't get a quarterback in return. You didn't get a draft pick that makes it even that much easier to get a goal. You got a late first-round pick, right? We know what late first-round picks can usually net you at the quarterback position here in Cleveland. It's not been a great result for the Browns when they've tried it. And we know from this year that if a team is dead set on taking a quarterback, a late first-round pick's not going to move the needle. So if you're going to sell me this argument that because Myles was awesome last year and the team was garbage, that justifies trading him, in that trade itself, you need to explain to me how trading Myles is going to make the offense better. And I don't think you can do that with this trade. So I've heard that a lot. And look, because we're all coping, I don't think people are going to push back on that point because they just want to feel as good as possible about trading a guy like Myles Garrett as soon as possible. But let's be honest here for a second. That's just cope. We wouldn't be saying this, and we weren't saying this when we thought we still had Myles Garrett on the roster, right? It's only now that Myles isn't on the roster that we're saying shit like that. And here's the other part about that argument. Like, if Myles' contract was so giant that it was stopping the team from being able to make moves on the offensive line, and it was stopping the team from being able to trade. Basically, people are making a basketball argument for this whole Myles Garrett thing, but it doesn't make sense because it's not basketball. Myles' contract was not stopping you from making moves on the offensive line. The Browns made 3 big moves this offseason on the offensive line with Myles Garrett's contract. Like, there's no way you can convince me that anything that you have done so far to fix the offense couldn't have been done with Myles Garrett still on the roster. Like, that's the thing about this that makes no sense. If this were basketball and he had a super max and it put you in the super luxury tax, or whatever they call it in the NBA, right? Then maybe you can find an argument there that makes sense for that. But that's not what we're doing here, right? Like, the Browns weren't above the salary cap. They had room. They were going to have room for years. There's just no argument to make that we couldn't have fixed the offense and like had Myles on the roster, unless you're convinced that Myles was going to retire early because he was so sick of playing in Cleveland, which, if that's where you're coming from, fine, right? I don't agree with you. I don't think Myles is going to take it that far. I don't think Myles is going to retire in order to not play in Cleveland anymore. I think he would have kicked and screamed and bitched and moaned for a couple of years. But if the Browns had turned it around, I think you could have fixed it. I saw this whole thing like Kobe, right? That era where Kobe was on the Lakers and he wanted to trade for like 3 years. Smush Parker was his teammates. He hated playing in LA. for a little while after the Shaq trade. But eventually the Lakers made moves that made them contenders again, and Kobe was happy playing with the Lakers. I feel like we could have gone through that period, these 2 years with Myles Garrett, figured out a way to get back into contention by 2027, and then Myles would be happy again, right? I would have rather taken that gamble than just give up on the idea of having Myles on the team. You can agree with me, you can disagree with me, but let's stop acting like trading Myles Garrett was our only way of getting better as a football team. When Myles Garrett and anything involved with Myles Garrett being on this team was not stopping the Browns from being better. That's not what was happening. And when you present it like that, that's what people are implying, but it's not even close to being how that works. If you want to sell this trade, I think it's simple, right? I think you can sell this trade not by trying to convince us that trading Myles Garrett will somehow make us a better team. I don't think that's really believable to most people. But you can sell this trade by selling what Andrew Berry's been doing, right? Which is selling us on Jared Verse, right? Don't let us think about Myles. He's not here anymore. He could have stayed. He could have gone. Whatever happens with Myles, right? But Jared Verse is here. And we got that guy plus picks in return. Because when you start to sell Jared Verse, then you start to sell me things that I can envision and be excited about, right? Because there is a lot to be excited about with Jared Verse. We'll talk more about this trade, but first I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fun way to earn cash while you watch your favorite teams. No complex betting rules, just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Here are my picks for this upcoming season, AFC North edition. Jimmy Bernard, I have less than 475. This has to do with volume available in Pittsburgh's offense. Quincy Judkins, I have over 975. Browns improved line. I think the run game's going to be better with it. Chase Brown, under 900 yards. Joe Burrow equals less rushing yards usually for the Bengals offense. Mark Andrews, more than 475 yards. Lamar's going to need a safety blanket. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You could follow me on the app at Quinn_C to see all my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineup to download the app using the link in the description. And here's what I mean by just sell me on Jared Verse. Stop trying to sell me this idea that trading Myles is the only way we could have gotten better. I don't buy that idea. But what I do buy is, what I'm hearing about Jared Verse. So let's get to Nathan Segura. He's talking about Jared Verse and what he's heard about him as a locker room leader.
Jared Verse is known in LA as a locker room leader, as an alpha dog.
Yep.
And I think that's something on a young team that you need that here. And so you get that, you get the picks. Again, the picks yes, you talk about it because it makes a trade complete, but we're talking about the 2026 Cleveland Browns. Jared Verse is one of your starting defensive ends now. Myles Garrett will be with the Rams. And Verse, as I said, very productive in his 2 seasons. Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2024. And last year, Pro Bowler again for the second straight season is kind of a cornerstone of that very, very good Rams defense.
That's the big selling point to me, right? Is what you could get out of Jared Verse going to be more of a fit for longer than what you could have got out of Myles Garrett, right? Because the math that I imagine that Andrew Berry was doing, the way that it makes sense in my mind is he was thinking to himself, we can drag Myles' feet for 2 more years, force him to play because he's under contract and he's not going to retire, and hope that we get into a situation where Myles is eventually happy again. And maybe we keep Myles. Or if we don't, then Myles has to go, right? You got to trade him eventually. So let's just calculate this as maybe you could have kept Myles for a season or 2, right? 2 more seasons of Myles. Or you can go and get Jared Verse, who's under a rookie deal for the next, 2 years? He's under a rookie deal. And then you have him under first right of refusal. So basically a restricted free agent that you could sign to a long-term deal. Basically, you have how many years of an extension you get? 4 or 5? You can basically get somewhere around 6 years of control of Jarrett Verse. And you're thinking to yourself, no, Jarrett Verse is not the player that Myles Garrett is. We're not going to have the same ceiling on defense with Jarrett Verse that we have as Myles Garrett. But if Jarrett Verse can be, I know they don't play the same position, but let's say Jarrett Verse can be to this team what Calais Campbell has been to so many other teams, right? A all-pro, Pro Bowl level player who is the leader of that defense, who helps develop young guys, who helps develop the right mentality, who helps develop the identity of this organization, and has the longevity of being a staple in this organization. Then you can start to tell me over a long period of time that maybe we didn't get, then that's how it can start to feel like you got what was worth it in a Myles trade. That's the avenue for this trade to be successful, is through that lens. Now, again, that is putting a lot on Jarrett Verse. Right now, he is not playing at the level that like a Calais Campbell was at his peak yet, right? He could get there. He certainly has the potential to get there, but that's not where he's been the last couple of years. So certainly it's a lot of pressure to put on him. Also, we're putting the whole identity of the organization on his shoulders. I'm sure that he feels that pressure and he welcomes that pressure, right? But welcoming that pressure and being able to live up to that pressure, two different things. And that's a lot to put on Jarrett Verse's shoulders. But if he can carry that, then he can make it so that, 6-7 years down the line, we're not really interested in figuring out who won or lost the Myles Garrett trade because we're happy with what we got, right? And that's where we need to be, right? In order, we put too much emphasis on who technically wins or loses a trade or who wins or loses the draft. What matters is, are you happy with what you got, right? I talked about this with draft picks before. The Browns took Myles Garrett number 1 overall. Pat Mahomes went in that same draft after Myles Garrett. Now, technically speaking, in a redraft, you would probably put Pat Mahomes over Myles Garrett in a redraft because Pat Mahomes is arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And he plays quarterback, obviously. So that would put him ahead of Myles in a redraft. So technically, you should regret it. But did Browns fans regret that selection? No, because they were happy with what they got at the end of the day, right? You just want to be happy with what you got out of a situation. And if we could walk away and we're happy with what we got out of that first round pick, and we're happy with what we've gotten out of Jarrett Verse, if we line it up and the value's not necessarily equal to some metrics to what the Rams got with Myles Garrett, it's not going to matter as much because we'll still be happy at the end of the day. And I think Jarrett Verse is the path to that for Browns fans. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and act like trading Myles Garrett was the only way that this team could get better. No, there were a lot of ways this team could have got better and kept Myles Garrett on the roster. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and act like I think trading Myles is this 4D chess brain move by Andrew Berry. It's not. Trading Myles is a admission of failure, right? That's what it is at the end of the day. Regardless of why you had to trade Myles, whether it's because he did not want to play for you this year, whether it's because you did not think you can keep him over the long term, it could be either of those two reasons. It's still an admission of failure because in a perfect world, Andrew Berry has said this himself, he would have just been able to keep Myles Garrett on the roster. So I'm not going to sit here knowing that and try to sell you that, oh, no, we actually had to do this because this is the only way we can get better. That's bullshit. It's cope. It's not real, right? It's stuff you tell yourself to make you feel better about something that you actually don't feel good about. But what's not cope is Jarrett Verse is a good player. That's something that we've been saying even before this trade, right? What's not cope is that Jarrett Verse brings a different skill set to the table as far as his leadership abilities. That matters when you have a team as young as the Cleveland Browns. That's important. What's important is that Jared Verse is in a situation where it's very easy to keep him on the team for the next 6 years. That's what's important about this. That's what's not cope. And that's what we can get to eventually. That'll make us feel better about today. Well, not today, but the trade. All right, let's hear what Joe Thomas had to say about this trade.
The Browns just traded away the best defensive player in NFL history. But it was the right move, and let me tell you why. What's up, guys? Joe Thomas. I played 11 years in Cleveland for the Browns. Was a first ballot Hall of Fame left tackle in 2023. I had to try to block that monster Myles in practice during his rookie season, and I know what Myles means to that locker room. I know what it means to that city. I know what he means to that team. And he rewrote the record books across the board. Nobody's ever gotten after the quarterback in the way that he has. There's no way you can ever replace him. And you can't even really try. And I'm going to be honest with you, it hurts to say it. It hurts to hear it. It hurts to think about it. I hate knowing that Myles is going to be in a different jersey this upcoming fall. But sometimes the right move, it's also the hardest one to make. Because here's what I've learned after 11 years in the NFL. The mark of great NFL teams and great players is how fast can you look yourself in the mirror and accept the circumstances that you have right now? And then moving forward as quickly as you can, making the best decisions that are available to you in front of you. The NFL train is going to keep moving down the tracks. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care who's hurt, who's been traded. In practice, you lose a guy because he got injured. What do? You don't stop practice. You move the drill and you keep playing. Honestly, this is why you make a trade like this. Because both teams are going to walk away after this trade better than they were before they made this trade. The Rams are all in. They're going for their ring. They're going for their Super Bowl. Myles is going to put them over the top. And I'm happy that Myles gets a chance to go chase a ring. The Browns, they're building right now. They've got a young core. They just had a great draft. And they get Jared Verse, a 25-year-old Pro Bowl pass rusher, plus a first, a second, and a third. Everybody wins. In my heart of heart, Myles is always going to be a Cleveland Brown. Always. But this is a new era. Jared Verse is coming. The Browns just...
All right, so that was Joe Thomas's thoughts on it. And I think he said some things that make some sense there, right? Obviously. Where he's talking about NFL teams have to kind of acknowledge what the circumstance is and make a move quickly off of it, right? And certainly losing Myles in this way would be more preferable than like letting Myles walk in free agency and getting nothing back for him, right? I don't know if that was the timing for the Cleveland Browns. I know people will argue with me about it, but like Myles wasn't at the end of a contract. He wasn't looking free agency dead in the face. He didn't really have a clear path to just leave unless the Browns wanted him to leave. And like we're talking about Myles like he's at the twilight of his career, right? Like I think a lot of this conversation makes sense if we're trading a 35-year-old Myles Garrett, but we traded a 29, 30-year-old Myles, or 31-year-old Myles Garrett, right? Like he's still in the prime of his career, and he probably has, at the very least, 5 more really good seasons left in him. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I said this before the trade. I think it makes sense to say after the trade. And y'all agreed with me when I said it before the trade. I think Myles is eventually going to have a 25-sack season. You know what I mean? Especially if he gets to the right situation. He might do it this year, right? So I think that's my only issue with what Joe is saying is that, like, what he's saying makes sense if Myles were 35 instead of 31. What he's saying makes a lot more sense if Myles was in the last 2 years of his contract versus the first year. Well, versus the first real year of his contract. Like, it doesn't make as much sense there when the team has as much control over Myles' future as they had when they traded Myles. So that's the one part of what Joe Thomas said that I'll push back on. But if it became clear to Andrew Berry that being able to retain Myles for the long term was just not going to happen, right? And he made this deal, then this is a way of losing Myles Garrett while allowing yourself the the ability to not be embarrassed in the return that you get from Myles. And if that's the calculation that they had, if that's where they're at with it, whatever. You know what I mean? I feel like the way to sell this trade is that Jared Verse really has to live up to his end of the bargain. Not just as a good football player, but as a culture setter and as a leader and as somebody who can help build you an identity and build you a voice as an organization. If that happens, then I don't know if we'll ever say it's worth it, but we'll definitely be okay with, we'll be happy with what we got. You know what I mean? And I think that's just where we need to get to, right? Will it ever be worth it? I doubt it. Myles Garrett is a tremendous player, and I think he's going to play great until he's like 40. We'll probably always have a what if in our mind if we were able to keep Myles Garrett. That's just how these things go. But can you be happy with what you got? I think that's a different and more attainable conversation for this trade. And I think that's within reach. So look, for some of you guys who are already sold on this trade because you want to just believe that everything's going to work out for the Browns in the best way possible, what I'm saying might not be for you because you're already sold, right? This message is not for the people who need no convincing on a Myles Garrett trade, who will write their own headcanon to make the Myles Garrett trade make sense, much like we've made the Deshaun Watson trade make sense, or moving on from Baker Mayfield and so on and so forth, right? This is for the people who need convincing. This is for the people who are still furious about trading Myles Garrett. And you're not going to reach those people by telling them that trading Myles Garrett was a good thing. That's a ridiculous thing to say to that person, right? What you can sell is Jared Verse. What you can build is the idea of better leadership in the defense for young players, more vocal leadership, somebody who can give you a voice and build you an identity. And maybe that can get that person to be more comfortable with what the Browns did. That's just my 2 cents there. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.